So now, within the last lesson, we went through different ways to install and get the WordPress files on your server. So whether you're using local or whether you're using an online server, there's a few different ways to get up and running. So we've gone through that. There's also some documentation within cPanel that will explain how to set up WordPress, and I believe WordPress as well. So we're going to provide links for those, how to set that up quickly on your website. So most commonly, if you are on a server, you're going to have the cPanel access, and that's why we've got this up here as well, because we're actually going to need to create databases in order to accommodate WordPress. So within your cPanel, you should have something called phpMyAdmin. So this is what we've got open over here on our local host. But before we go into there, so I've already got I've got a bunch of databases set up and a bunch of tables set up here. So what we need to do first is to set up a database in order to accommodate your WordPress. So going back to here, we'll just walk you through step by step, and then when we get to the database part, we're going to actually set up the database. So no matter what, if you're on localhost or if you're on your server, you should be able to access this setup config file. And if you're not at this point, then you should go back and try the previous lesson again in order to get up to this point. So all we have to do, and again, WordPress is just going to be surprisingly easy to install. It's going to be really straightforward, and I'm going to walk you through step by step how to do this. So first thing you do is select the language for WordPress. So it actually accommodates a lot of different languages, which is really cool and another benefit for using WordPress. And WordPress has a lot of benefits for using WordPress. Besides the fact that it's free and open source, there's a lot of really cool things you can do with WordPress. And we're going to be getting into some of those in the upcoming lessons. So I'm going to go ahead and press continue. And here it says this database part. So if you've never set up a database before, it's going to be really easy to do as well. So don't worry about that. And so here we've got welcome to WordPress, and we've got that we have to set up a database name, a username, a password, a host, and a table prefix. So what all of this means is that we need to have a database name. So this is the database that I'm actually, these are the databases that I've got on my site here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to just go ahead and create a brand new database name here for this WordPress, even though I already have a WordPress here. This is my local machine, so I've done some other tutorials and I've got quite a few databases going on here. But I am going to walk you through step by step, so I'm going to create a brand new database. If you are on your server, then you go to cPanel and you could click the MySQL databases. And from here, I'm able to actually do the same thing that I'm doing in phpMyAdmin, where I'm actually creating a brand new database. So go ahead and create a database. So I'm going to go ahead and create a database called WordPress, and I'm going to go ahead and create a database called WordPress over here. So as we can see, we've got our brand new database, no tables in it as of yet. And the same thing over here, create database. So we're creating a database called WordPress, and because I'm in this demo of cPanel, I'm not actually able to create a database, unfortunately. But you should have enough permissions in order to create that database. There's also creating MySQL users. So you're going to have to do this as well if you're using your server. On localhost, we already got users and passwords set up and created, so we don't have to worry about that. With XAMPP, they're already pre-configured and ready to go. So if you are using cPanel, then go down here and do username, password, and create a username and password. Make sure you write these down because these are what's going to give you that access to your database, and this is exactly what WordPress is going to need here, and we're going to have to update our WordPress file. The good thing about localhost, and I'm using localhost, is I've got my database host here, I've got my database user, which is always going to be root on a default setup of XAMPP, and there's no password, so it's just a blank password. So I have all of this information, plus I have got that brand new database name that I just created, which is going to be WordPress. So I'm just going to note these in a separate file here. So this is going to be for my configuration. Yours might be different, and especially if you're using a different server, you probably have to look up and see where your database is located. So they're not always going to be localhost. They might differ depending on host to host. So this is the information, this database host information is what you have to get from your server. So this will change, and then the user and password are going to be exactly what you've just entered into your cPanel. That's why write it down, because we're going to actually need it in the config file. So here it just says simply open up WP config, and so they've got a sample here, and here fill in your information, save it as wp config.php. So we get rid of the sample and we save it as wp config.php. And again, this is going to be really simple to set up. So I've got it here, and as we can see when I make the screen bigger, so I've got all of that information up here at the top where they're asking for database name. And if you're unfamiliar with these types of values, setting them up, and this is PHP code. So if you're unfamiliar with these are just going to be, WordPress uses a global configuration file where it gets passes over this information and provides access to your hosting environment. So going over here, so mine was blank, my user was root, and my database name was just WordPress. So again, this is going to be my configuration. Yours might be slightly different. So again, depending on what you've set up, and this is going to be what WordPress is going to use in order to set up the database and run all the tables. So this is probably the most important first step in setting up WordPress, and after this it's going to be really smooth sailing. So this is the main sticking point, so that's why I say make sure that you do write those down, write in the right values here, and then save it as wp-config.php, because as we can see, we don't have a config file here yet, and this is actually how WordPress knows to run the install, because until you have that config file, it's going to always ask you to do that install. So now I've gone ahead, I've saved it as WordPress config, going back out, reloading this WP, or just going to localhost, doing that install. And we can see here that it's picked up the database information, that config information, so it's not going to ask me that again. And here, so we've got our site title, and this username and password, this is actually going to be your WordPress username and password in order to log into the WordPress admin. So it's always advisable that you keep it actually different than, I'm just going to call it admin, but try to keep it different than what you are using for your database, because this is going to be entirely separate. And here it's got a site title. So I'm going to just call it WordPress test site. And here is a password. So I'm going to just call it password. So obviously very weak, but this is on my local machine. And so obviously when you are creating it, make sure that you have a good password. And then you've got your option here to enter in an email address. And this is in case you've lost your password, so WordPress can set up access to the website. So just over here, I entered in my email address, added in the confirm that I am using a weak password, so it does warn you about this. So I had to check that off, and now I can finish my install of WordPress. And this is the part where it's actually going to build in that all of that install information, and make sure that you do write down your password, your chosen password. WordPress has been installed. Were you expecting more steps? Sorry to disappoint. And this is the part where I said WordPress is just so easy to install. So now when I go over to my website here, and I'm just going to click off Remember Me, I'm logged into WordPress. And if I actually go over to the website, I can see that I now have a WordPress website installed, and literally this just took me minutes to set up and get running. So that's it, and now we're up and running with WordPress. And in the upcoming lessons, we're going to show you how to utilize WordPress, how to use some plugins, how to use posts, pages, comments, what all of this means here in the dashboard, and how to really supercharge your WordPress, get up and running in just minutes. So you can have your own custom WordPress site literally in less than an hour from start to finish.